Welcome to the Mainly Facts. If you've missed any of our videos, this compilation is precisely what you need. Whether you're seeking entertainment, background noise, or simply want to kill time, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. That way, whenever you're struggling to sleep or hungering for fresh insights, you'll know where to find them. Without any more delay, let's dive right into the content. What are your best "this customer is totally trying to screw us over" stories? Story 1. I used to work at a used video game/record store, and we got our fair share of nut jobs. The butt hat to take the cake, though, was about 2 months ago. A woman came in to trade a few boxes of DVDs, CDs, and the like. My manager and I spent about half of an hour looking at the conditions of the discs, and every single one looked like it had been ice skated on. There were even a few cases with dead insects in them. Utterly disgusting. We told her that we had to reject all of her trade because of the poor condition. She flips crap. She starts screaming that we're racist and that she's going to bring her boys down to jump us. Then, out of nowhere, she sprints out of the store, leaving all of her crap. 2 hours later, she comes back in, says nothing, and just starts loitering around the cash register. Out of nowhere, she begins screaming that my manager harassed her in a store full of customers. My manager is gay. This is why you should avoid working at stores that buy stuff from people. GameStop, pawn shops, black market organ sellers. It just isn't worth it. Someone isn't going to be happy with you, and they are going to make life hell. Story 2. I work at Olive Garden, and we have that oh-so-famous soup and salad deal. Well, I had a party of 4 come in, all about 16 or 17, all order the soup and salad. Considering they are my only table, I fairly quickly bring out drinks and their soup and salad. They all thank me and start eating. Before I walk away, they ask if they can see my manager. I assume they want to put in a good word. My manager comes over. Let me explain him real quickly. He's from some Pacific Island country and has a very hard time understanding people when they talk too quickly, let alone how the company is run and how to even use the computers to put in orders. No, I don't know how he got this job. Well, anyway, my manager comes over and asks the table what he can do for them. Very little, obviously. They start complaining that I'm an awful server and have yet to bring out any of their food. According to them, they never got anything, drinks or food. Now, it's quite obvious that they got everything they ordered. They demand that everything get taken off the bill. Now, my manager isn't obviously going to argue with them because he won't understand what he's arguing about, so he just gives them all free food, free dessert, and a $25 gift card. And I get written up for customer complaints. But it doesn't end there. They stiff me, yes. But one of the 17 or so S-bags has the audacity to leave me her phone number with her name. I formulate my plan. I call her well after my shift with them, 2 days actually. After a few rings, it goes to voicemail once with the typical, "Hello, you've reached the Sprint voicemail box of..." Perfect. She calls back. I start, "Hello, I'm calling in regards to your most recent bill with Sprint." She instantly calls for her mother. Her mother picks up. "Hello, sorry to call under such harsh pretenses, but your daughter recently came in a Olive Garden I work at, nearly gets me fired, and then stiffs me." I go on to tell my story. She actually takes my side and makes sure everything is taken care of. The next day at work, I receive a letter with $50 and a handwritten note saying how her daughter will be selling her new car, never seeing the light of day, blah, blah, blah. Apparently, she does this to a lot of services and a lot of different restaurants, according to her mother, who recently found out. Yeah, I'm sorry. As much as I am for people to take advantage of big companies and chains in whatever ways they can, while following the law and stuff, don't do crap that will get innocent workers screwed over. And to do something that got this worker in trouble and then not give any tip, that's just friggin' gross. Story 3. Used to work at a bookstore, and for a while I was the guy who covered breaks for the people in the music and movies area. One day, a woman in her latest 20s, clearly someone who worked out, fake tans, fake nails, you know the type, comes to the store with an open DVD and asks the guy at the front desk to do a return. He asks why she wants to return it. She says she didn't like it. He then explains that we don't accept returns on open DVDs, shows her the sign saying as much, and says if it isn't defective, there isn't anything he can do. She gets angry and decides to try to come upstairs to try getting the refund from me. The front desk guy calls me, lets me know what's going on. I see her get off the escalator and watch her break the case for the DVD which she had bought. She approaches and I calmly explain to her why we can't accept a refund because she simply didn't like the DVD. She tells me she wants to return it because it's broken. So I tell her I witnessed her break it on her walk over to me. She goes ape crap at me and demands to see my supervisor. At this point, the person who was on break returns and is sort of my supervisor, so I told her the situation and let her try to explain the exact same thing. The woman is now furious and demands to speak to a manager. Manager walks over, we explain the situation to him, and expects him to say, "I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do." Instead, the pansy manager took one look at the woman and said, "Well, just this once, let's make an exception." Story 4. I used to work for a furniture company in the mid-90s. One day, we got a memo that there was a former coworker who was using stolen cards to do in-store pickups or deliveries to fake addresses, like an apartment, but they would pick up the furniture in the apartment lobby claiming the elevator was broken or something. The FBI was getting involved because it was in the amounts of thousands of dollars across state lines. A few days later, I got a call, a big order. The kind of order that would blow over quota and give me a bonus. "Can you deliver this to New Jersey?" "Sure." I took down the credit card info. Then I asked for a callback number so I could relate the shipping info. They hesitated. I said, "MasterCard requires this." Let me give you a Visa then." Okay. I told that info and then said, "Oh, I forgot. Visa does that too." "I'll call you back," they said. So I called the home office and told them I think it was those guys. The MO checked out, and they said if they call back, try and get an Amex card, and then don't ask for a callback number. Just set up a delivery. And hours later, they called back. Got my assistant, and I told her to just take the order. When it was completed, she had an Amex card order for some ungodly amount. I called the home office, and they arranged a sting with the FBI. Later, the drivers told me what had happened. They had to make a rendezvous point where they loaded a bunch of armed agents into the truck. Then, once the woman signed the bill of lading, the FBI goon squad jumped from the truck and arrested her and 4 accomplices without much resistance. Later, MasterCard, Visa, and Amex gave me reward checks for recovering stolen cards. Sweet! Wow, I expected a lot of things from this thread, but I was not ready for the FBI sting operation. I have to imagine that is the most exciting thing to happen working for a furniture store, and I say this as someone who worked in one. I worked in TVs, though, and had 1 or 2 shady customers coming in, but nothing that big. Also just ridiculously rich people getting 75-inch TVs for their bedroom, which is just, who wants that? Story 5. I used to work for The Source, Radio Shack in the US, in a very low-traffic area, so we won't get any people who come in just to browse like at the malls. People come in with an idea of what they wanted, and it was up to me to get it for them. So I'm alone, my manager is on lunch break, and this old, frail lady walks in. I ask if I can help her, and she gives me a scoff and rolls her eyes. I need a cell phone. I help her out as much as I can. I tell her that pay-as-you-go are the cheapest rates and you have no contracts to bind you. She seems pleased, but decides to purchase a Rogers phone on a 2-year contract. Whatever, more commission for me. 3 weeks later, she comes in unhappy and asks to return the phone. I explain to her that it would cost around $400 to cancel the plan she has created and that she's too late for a refund, 15 days maximum. She gets peed and storms out. 2 months later, she comes in, attitude up the wazoo, telling me that I sold her a busted phone and she wants all of her money back. I was alone again, so I asked her to give me her phone so I could look at it. I present my hand and she reaches over to hand it to me. At the last second, she moves her hand a bit to the side and drops the phone on the tips of my fingers where it then falls to the floor. She goes ape crap. "You broke my phone. I want my money back and I want a new phone, blah, blah, blah." I try to explain to her that her Nokia 3100-esque phone will not break from a simple fall. You would need to throw the phone into the fires of Mount Doom to destroy it. She doesn't agree and starts yapping. I tell her that even if her phone was an expensive smartphone like my BlackBerry, it would take the fall and still work. So drop it, she says. I ask if I drop my phone from the same height and it still works, if she will leave, and she agrees. Now, I'm not going to drop my brand new BlackBerry I purchased just weeks before to some dumb old coot that is sour because she didn't listen to my first advice. I think quickly on my feet and remember the stash of fake plastic phones right under the counter. I grab one that looks just like my phone and kamehameha that crap right into the floor where it shatters in 100 pieces. We both stare at the pieces for a second, and she is astonished. She fumbles with her things and takes her phone and never comes back. The end of that story was far more buck wild than I was really prepared for, but I love it. Also, as someone who used to sell phone plans at Walmart, I would rather jump through a plate glass window than sell an elderly person a phone. Look, I love the elderly in most things, but some of them are just so impossible to work with when it comes to even non-smartphones. If you sell them a contract, you will see them again, and again, and again. People who have dialed numbers written on bathroom stalls, what's your story? Story 1. I knew a guy that called a number written on a $5 bill. He figured she must be a quality girl because it was a 5 and not a single. She had a great voice on the phone, so they made a date. He played guitar in a popular local band, and there was a hip restaurant next to the club they were playing, so they arranged to meet before the gig. He figured they'd have dinner, and then he'd impress the crap out of her with his playing. He was a truly fine guitarist. So he walked into the restaurant and looked for a girl in a pink dress. There was one, and she was enormous. So he slipped out before she saw him. So during the show, he sees the crowd parts as the girl in the pink dress makes her way to the front where she glares at him during the entire set. Afterward, she screamed at him for standing her up. He felt a little guilty, but he said he'd feel worse if he'd had dinner with her and then dropped her. After all this, his warning was to not call numbers you see on currency. Or here's an idea, go on the weird date you set up and maybe don't judge by first look. Actually, I was going to say that they might have connected, but I don't know if she would have connected with a guy who would judge her like that. But also, who gets dates by putting their number on a $5 bill? What is any of this? You know what? Whatever, I can't with this one. Story 2. Okay, so it isn't a bathroom stall, but a hilarious story. Back a long time ago, Paris Hilton had her T-Mobile Sidekick hacked and all her contact numbers leaked online. I was contracting some 15 to 16-year-old kid to do a website for me at the time. About 4 to 5 hours before the list went public, this guy building my site hits me up on AIM, yeah, that old, and is like, my buddy just did some crazy hack, he got all these celebs numbers. Bull crap, I said, because at the time this was unheard of. He sent me a text file of about 150 names. The first one that stuck out to me that I knew who they were was Fred Durst. Rang him up, frozen, then said, "Yes, is this Mr. Durst? Yeah, who is this?" I truthfully explained the exact scenario, and my morbid skepticism led me to dial him up. He said something about him going to have to turn his phone off now and actually thanked me for giving him a heads up. After that, I waited a few hours and picked a number at random, someone I didn't recognize or know. Wrong idea. She picked up the phone and said my number was now logged into her phone and the FBI were on the case. Whatever. And she hoped I died. At that moment, I knew the list went public. I logged into some Merc chats, and it was story after story of interactions. I don't like his music, but Fred Durst seemed like a cool cat, and I like to think I gave him a heads up before crap hit the fan. Story 3. Best experience, became regular F-buddies with the guy. He was a bike enthusiast, and we went biking several weekends. Worst experience? Went to meet the guy. After talking and deciding whose wiener would go into whose orifices, was the guy had lied about his stats. I'm talking real chubby, beer belly out to 10 months pregnancy level. Well, I'm here anyway, all revved up, secretly grit my teeth and say, let's do it. He wants it without condom. He claims to be virgin and needs his cherry popped. Seriously, dude, your number's on the frickin' wall of a mall bathroom and you want me to believe you're a virgin? He got offended at my nasty insinuations, told me to go F yourself and lose my number. I ain't gonna wanna see you insert racial slur for brown people here face ever, and I should go back to my own country where I belong and do unspeakable things to goats. When I told him we have no goats in Toronto, the weather is much too cold for them, he got even more mad. Fun times. First, a little shocked you have multiple bathroom stall number stories, like you have a best and worst, which kind of implies there are more that fall in between, but hey, if you've had mostly good experiences, live your life, my friend. And the worst experience guy most definitely sounds like someone deserving of the adjective worst. Do the rest of the world a favor and cross his number out for future people. Story 4. It was written on a piece of paper way back around 10 years ago. It said, "Call this number if you're struggling with life." I was 13, so I called the number. We never met, but he had a really sweet voice and we talked for about an hour. Gave me great advice about how the world can be cruel to gays like me, but that the first future will get better. We never communicated after that. If I could meet the guy to thank him, even for just a second, I would. Thanks, Mr. Target. That's what he wanted to be called. Story 5. When my friend and I were about 11, there was a public bathroom in the park where we had soccer practice, and outside that public bathroom was a payphone, and on that payphone was scrawled a number, and above it the word intercourse. I don't recall ever paying for a call, so maybe it was a 1-800 number. I don't remember. It was a recording of a woman's voice. I remember only the beginning, but I can hear it crystal clear. "You want to have fun? Yeah." And then a bunch of feminine giggling. We would hang up when the recording asked for a credit card number to continue the call. I think we were terrified our parents' credit card would somehow get charged and we would get court. Kid logic. We were/are both straight females, but we still called that thing all the time. It was seriously the most risque thing I had ever done up to that point, and also probably for a long time afterwards, sadly. Story 6. I found a business card in a phone booth printed cryptically with, "If you don't call, you'll never know," and a phone number. Since I had time left on the phone card, I called, and now I know. It was a pseudo-religious self-help cult trying to recruit people to seminars at their ranch in New Mexico, somewhere with promises of finding a new spiritual family. No thanks. The last thing I need is more family. You know what? We've read a few doozies thus far, but this is by far the worst number on this list. I would rather get someone who's an obvious creep than some cult like that. People looking for a quick and dirty roll in the hay are just having fun, but cults like that want to ruin your life or get you jumping on Oprah's couch. Story 7. When I was younger, someone wrote, "For a good time, call," and my number on the playground slide. People would call it a couple times a week, laugh, and then hang up. It started to get annoying, so I went to the playground to cover it up. Someone saw me doing it and called the cops saying I was vandalizing the playground. I had to explain to the cop that I was just removing my number so people would stop calling me. Story 8. I was at a restaurant, and they had to give $1 to charity and put your name on this piece of paper we post on our wall. While waiting in the lobby for a friend, I saw one that had a name and a phone number with "Call Me" under it. I figured, what the hell? Why not? Girl answered, and I asked if it's X. She says, yes. I explained that I'm in the lobby of the restaurant and her name is on the wall with her phone number. She doesn't believe me despite my best efforts to convince her I don't know who she is. Eventually, she asks me to walk out of the front door of the restaurant, which I obliged, and she says, "Holy crap." Meanwhile, I standing in a parking lot looking around trying to figure out who the hell is looking at me. She asked me to take the paper down and thanked me. Apparently, one of her coworkers told her that he did it and she didn't believe him. They worked in the area and frequented the restaurant. I mean, that is kind of funny, but also low-key semi-doxing that poor lady, so I would say probably don't do that. I was kind of hoping you would walk outside, she would be standing there, and then you end the story with, "And that's how I met my wife." But I suppose this is a little more realistic. What's an experience you shared with a friend where you both silently agreed to never speak of it again? Story 1. Nothing too crazy, but my best friend has never kissed a guy, and she was afraid she would mess it up, so she begged me to teach her first. I'm a girl, by the way. I agreed, and I knew she was nervous, so we had a few glasses of wine first, and then we tried to practice. I leaned in to kiss her, and she giggles, which makes me laugh. After several unsuccessful tries, we actually managed lip contact for about half a minute. I was really proud of her because I knew she was nervous. She suddenly bursts into tears and gets snot all over me and cries about being a bad friend for asking me to do this. I probably shouldn't have given her too much to drink. We never speak of it only because we know we will just laugh too much and she's mortified. Apologies, I tend to ramble. Story 2. When I was nearing the end of my freshman year of college, a few friends of mine dropped acid one Sunday afternoon. The acid was apparently very strong and all, but one of them went off trip-a-dip-a-doodling on their merry way. The one I speak of got stuck in his own head and was found wandering through the halls buck naked, with a blank expression on his face. Oh, and I also forgot to mention this was during a family visit weekend. Anyways, after a couple friends and I grab a towel and corral our friend, into a dorm room, he proceeds to sit on the bed and stare out the window, still completely naked. Being the responsible person I am, I realize that he's so out of touch with reality to the point that he may accidentally hurt himself if left alone, so I tell the gathering crowd that I'll stay with him and they can go enjoy the beautiful Sunday Santa Cruz afternoon. I then grabbed the nearest smoking device and got incredibly high while I had to stare for hours at my naked friend on LSD while he worked his way out of his psychedelic pickle. Several people casually walked into the room, stared at my friend, stared at me, left, and then turned around and left during this time. A few hours into my marathon pot-laden babysitting venture, he looked over at me, stood up to put his pants on, and said, "That was freaking weird." We haven't mentioned it since. Honestly, if there's anything people should take from this, is if you're experimenting with hallucinogens, you should have someone there you can rely on to help you out if things go a little sideways. Not that I've done hallucinogens or am encouraging you to do any because that isn't legal most places. But if I had done them, I'm glad I had someone to drag me away from the Christmas display I was yelling at from the middle of the street. Story 3. Content warning, self-harm. Scroll to the timestamp on screen to skip this story. When I was 15, my friend Gerald was staying over for the weekend. It was the typical Friday night. We were up playing video games on my N64, shooting the crap and watching random horror movies at a low volume with the dialogue replaced with our own snarky narration while he browsed the net on my computer. This would be rude ordinarily, but he didn't have a computer or the internet at his home, and it was an opportunity to get him some exposure to both. We were playing Gauntlet Legends when he paused the game and looked at me. "Dude, your arm's bleeding." "I must have got myself on a tree while I was dirt biking. It's nothing. I'm fine. Now let's kill some dwarves." We started up again, but I could see him looking at my arm every few minutes out of the corner of my eye. He paused the game again, dropped the controller between his knees. "So if you don't tell me what's actually wrong, I'm waking up your mom." "I'm fine." "Dude, cut the crap. When you got up to grab a drink, your sleeve pulled up and I saw him." I sat there for a bit, closed my eyes, and sighed. He knew, so there was no point in hiding it or keeping up the charade. He lifted my sleeve as I sat there and hung my head quietly, then backed away in hushed silence. When I looked up to make eye contact, his eyes were rimmed with tears. "Why would you do that to yourself, man? Those aren't clean lines. You carved them with something." "It's complicated." "Then freaking uncomplicate for me." So I told him the truth. I was deeply depressed, my family was disintegrating, and it was the only way to get that kind of bottled emotional pain out of my system. I was halfway through explaining myself when he wrapped his arms around me and hugged the breath out of me. "I love you, Snapjackal. Not in a gay way, you're my best friend and you're like a brother to me. I'm there for you, man. Just don't do this again, alright? I won't tell anyone, but you better frickin' promise me you'll call me the next time it gets that bad." The rest of the night was understandably strained. No matter how we tried to forget it all, the elephant was still in the room. We never spoke about it again. He did his best to pretend nothing had happened the next day and would flat out not acknowledge my wounds. I'm glad your friend persisted, and I hope you took his words seriously. Same goes for any of you watching or listening. If you're struggling with self-harm, depression, or worse, please talk to someone you can trust. And if you see a friend and think you see a reason like this to speak up, please do so. I know it's awkward, but it might just save their life. Story 4. I had to make a throwaway just for this. When I was about 4 years old or so, I had a best friend whose name shall not be disclosed. We will call him Tom. Tom and I lived in the same neighborhood, so we had plenty of opportunities to stay over at each other's houses while our mothers jibber-jabbered in the next room. When we were at my house, we played in the basement, which was outfitted as a playroom with trains and Legos and all sorts of fun things, like markers. So he and I are downstairs in the playroom, and he decides that he's done playing with the trains, so he picks up an orange marker. We didn't have paper, so he finds this felt artboard and colors on the white cardboard backing. I want to get along with him, so I do the same, choosing a green marker. Well, he soon gets bored with this as well, but he thinks the colors would look cooler if the lights were out. So he wobbles up to the light switch, climbs on top of the toy chest, and turns off the lights. The colors do indeed look cooler. Of course, coloring is only so much fun when one is full of chocolate milk, so we both get up and walk over to where we'd tossed our socks earlier. I don't remember why we took off our socks, but it must have been something they said because we immediately peed all over them. Our socks were soon thoroughly soaked with our urine. This gave Tom an idea. He looked down at his mini-member and thought to himself, "Know what would look really cool if it were orange?" At least I assumed he thought that because he then started coloring his wiener orange. Maybe he just wanted a better tan. And of course, Tom is absolutely right. It does look cooler. But you know what's even cooler than orange? Green. Green is so much cooler than orange. So I color my own Wrinkle Van Willie green. Cue our Catholic mothers. Tom's mother is absolutely horrified. At least, that's what my own mother tells me. To be honest, I don't remember much after coloring the felt dartboard. My own mother, thankfully, I guess, took a much more humorous approach. She thought it was hysterical. Anyway, they took us upstairs to the bathroom and made us wash our little dongs in the bathtub while my mother washed and dried our socks. After that, Tom and his mom went home. I've never heard anything about that incident from anybody aside from my mother, and vague memories are my only assurance that the story is true. In any case, neither Tom nor I had ever spoken of it, nor will I ever, except to my fiancé, because if I don't, my mother will. Story 5. I'm going to get cool story broed for this, but a few years ago I was at a party and had gone with a longtime female friend. All was well at first, but as the night went on, we both had a bit too much to drink. Her boyfriend of over 2 years had suddenly dumped her by text, and I had just found out my girlfriend had cheated on me. I say this because we both were dancing, and we were both buzzed and emotionally unstable. As a joke, she grinds into me, laughing as she does it, but I start getting aroused and grind back. I suddenly realize what I'm doing and back off, but her face is red and she's visibly aroused. She pulls me into the bathroom and we proceed to do it. Not super hot, lustful, adult entertainment intercourse, but we both climax together, make out for a few minutes, then we both duck out, saying I had to hold her hair as she puked. The hostess, a mutual friend, offered us to stay the night, which we took her up on. She passed out. I was having a friggin' heart attack. We were buzzed. What if she freaks out? Did I just ruin a 7-year-long close friendship just to make my dong feel good and pee off our exes? A million things ran through my mind. I eventually nodded off. I woke up an hour later with her sprawled on me, which is fine. We've shared a bed more than a few times. She wakes up and blinks, looks at me, and goes, "What the frick? Buy me dinner first next time, dork." She ends it with a laugh that my face must have been ghost white. She hugs me and says, 2 consenting adults had intercourse. Plus, hey, better someone I know and trust than with some weird butthole who might have tried some crap. We're still friends, okay? If you need to be alone, I understand. I hug her back and ask her if she's up for some IHOP. All is well, we're still best of friends and hang out regularly. That was about 2 years ago, and we both haven't said a word about it. Though I still blush when I hear Buttons by Pussycat Dolls. First, just to be a party pooper for a second, if you have to question whether or not you're both sober enough to do it, the safest bet is to back off or at least ask. Not saying you were in the wrong, you had a buzz, she had a buzz, emotions were high, you both sound a little compromised. I'm glad things worked out well enough and you were able to be adults about things and remain friends. I just want everybody to be safe and make sure there's consent. Story 6. My best friend's husband hit on me a month before the wedding. We had all been drinking that night. He was wasted and I was slightly tipsy but fully aware. I told him off and told him if I ever found out that he tried that with another girl, I'd rip his appendage off. I was maid of honor at the wedding and I never told her. I thought about it, but they had already bought a house together, the wedding was set, and she was so dang happy. I put it out of my mind and pretended it never happened, and I'm glad I did. They were married for 5 years before she got brain cancer and died, leaving behind the daughter. He was the most doting husband during 7 months she wasted away and is truly an amazing father. He's remarried now and the most loyal man I've ever met. If I had taken his one idiot move as the basis his life, I could quite possibly have ruined a lot for him and for her. I was unsure if I was doing the right thing at the time, but now I know it was definitely the best thing to do. I'm sorry to hear your friend died, but gosh, it's nice to hear a story beginning the way yours did, where the assumed prick/B redeems himself at the end. What idiotic thing has your job done for the benefit of the employees? Title says it all. Essentially, the managers were all brought into the conference room, played team-building games, and had breakfast and lunch catered. This was because it was noticed that general employee morale was low and there was a high turnaround for the entry-level workers. What actually happened was most employees had to skip lunch, work overtime, and take on many extra tasks in order to make up for all of the absent managers. This made the entire staff bitter and create an us versus them attitude in the workplace. Any stories of poorly thought out workplace exercises? Story 1. At my firm, we used to have this CEO that felt really entitled and he was a huge prick. The company headquarters was in a 3-story building with 2 stairways, one on each end of the building. His office was next to the stairway entrance on one end of the building. For some reason, he believed this was an executive staircase, and only he was allowed to use it. Whenever he found another employee in it, he would yell at them and threaten to write them up. So all employees had to use the other stairway regardless of where their office was in the building. Such a huge inconvenience. Well, we all had the last laugh. He goes on this great vacation to Europe, and little did he know that while he was gone, the board of directors had fired him. His company vehicle was removed from his property, his access to company networks was revoked, his key cards were deactivated, and his office was packed up and placed outside the building the morning he arrived. He was truly blindsided. He came in claiming his car was stolen, only to see it parked in the front ready for the next CEO. Ah, karma. I mean, to be fair, I don't think the CEO did that for the benefit of any employee other than himself, but that doesn't mean I didn't love this story any less. After all, how often do these responses rigidly stick to the prompt? I'm all for deviating if it means a CEO has a bad time. Seriously, I don't care what the prompt is. Stories of execs getting their comeuppance are always welcome. Story 2. When I was 20, I was the lead supervisor on a program evaluation contract supervising 45 employees. The project was finished when I was out of the office. I worked from 12 to 8 p.m. It finished around 10:30 a.m. that morning. My boss called and told me it was finished and everyone was going out to eat to celebrate. So I said, "Oh, I'll come in now, give me a few minutes." And she said, "Great, we need you to come supervise the other team who wasn't on that project while we go." So effing stupid. Everything at that job was stupid, including letting a 20-year-old develop an evaluation for a statewide program on green jobs just out of the blue. I made the whole thing based on a few Wikipedia articles. F it. It was really successful, and a lot of other states use it now, but I ultimately got fired for wanting to be paid the same amount as the other supervisor whose team didn't do as well as mine. But it was a boys' club, so I got fired. A-holes. Story 3. Every year, my hotel holds a staff holiday party at which door prizes are given away. Our main competitor had theirs a week before, and staff with friends and spouses at that hotel reported back to us about the party's door prizes. iPhones, iPads, mini fridges filled with beer or groceries. The grand prize, a week for 4 at any hotel in their chain, including airfare and meals. Our party came, and my company's crapulence was revealed. All the door prizes were free 3 nights at specific hotels in our chain, no airfare, nothing else. Crappy hotels in non-destination cities and towns. 3 nights free in a hotel you had no desire to see, in a city you had 0 reason to visit, and the prize winner had to cover their own airfare. Staff morale plunged to an all-time low when 1 month later, the managers all had their weekend advance on a 4-day weekend at a nearby 5-star resort, all expenses covered, including golf and sailing. Yeah, that seems about right. Sounds like you all need to get yourself a job at your competitor's hotel because yours clearly doesn't give a crap about you. Honestly, the fact that you all don't get free nights at hotels in your chain as just a standard benefit of your job is frankly insulting. Story 4. In college, I worked at a retail shop that did its timesheets by hand honor system rules. We had all been there a while and cared about the store quite a bit enough that we frequently worked overtime and marked ourselves down as having left when we were supposed to. Then our skeezy boss decided too many of us were ripping her off by being late and leaving early, so she implemented a clock-in system. Boy, did that ever backfire. We no longer willingly stayed late, nor did we come in early. Things stopped getting done to the same extent. Employees started grumbling more because they weren't trusted, so the owner installed a security cam webcam, trained on us throughout the store, and she and her on-again, off-again boyfriend would call the store in the middle of heavy customer traffic to complain we hadn't finished stocking some unpopular item and tell us to drop everything to go do it. We'd happily do it if we could get away for a minute, but often the 2 of us, or one of us working, was too busy manning the register, greeting, explaining the store, giving out samples to stock the item at that exact moment. We'd get hell for it the next day. I'd been there 3 years, and on my last day there, they fired my awesomely amazing manager and told everyone else not to tell me in case I refused to show up. I would have shown up anyways, but it says what they thought of their employees. They tried to call me several times after that. Story 5. I wasn't there, but this is the story I got for a meeting I missed. The company holds a meeting where people actually have to travel and get hotels in the home city, including the CEO. The meeting was something where the CEO was supposed to talk, state of the company, etc. Morale was generally low because they had been cracking the whip on everyone for the last 2 years. Everyone was working 10 to 16 hours a day, sometimes on weekends too, on salary. So the CEO starts talking, making his presentation, and towards the end of the hour, the hotel staff starts setting up chafing dishes and getting food out. Everyone is hungry. The Q&A period is prolonged for an extra hour because people keep asking dumb questions. So finally, it ends and everyone lines up for food. It's fettuccine alfredo or something, and it is quite disgusting after sitting in the dish becoming lukewarm after an hour. To top it all off, the CEO in front of everyone says, "I'm not eating that crap, it's full of carbs." He leaves everyone behind to go out to a real restaurant. Some of the executives stayed behind to eat with the employees because they knew what this douchebag had just done. The CEO did something similar during the company Christmas party several months earlier. He traveled from his home state to the state where most of the employees are, showed up for about an hour, then asks one of the younger salespeople, "Where are the good clubs to go for getting drinks and a decent dinner?" He then takes off for the rest of the night, leaving us to eat the dinner served at the party. I quit quite a while ago, and he was replaced about a year later. Unfortunately, I've worked under CEOs that were much, much worse. Okay, I think we can all agree that CEO was a real piece of crap and frankly didn't even deserve the congealed fettuccine you were all left to eat. What a dingus. But can we talk about another thing? Dear people at meetings and whatnot that prolong the meeting with asinine questions that could easily be addressed with a quick email or perhaps by just paying attention to the rest of the meeting, your coworkers don't like you, and every question you ask brings you closer and closer to their wrath. Story 6. Creating an on-the-second policy. You have to be at your desk exactly the second your workday begins. This has created an atmosphere where they find it really, really hard to get anyone to do anything extra. On the second the workday ends, everyone leaves. Before, we didn't care about a minute or two here and there. Our time clock through ADP is not calculated down to the minute. It's by the quarter hour. So it can be manipulated quite easily, which quite a few people do. If you have to be here at 8, if you clock in at 8:07, it marks the time as 8:07, but for purposes of payroll, it counts as being an 8 o'clock. Then when lunch comes around, let's say noon, they clock out at 11:53 and clock in at 1:07. Then when it comes time to leave, they clock out at 4:23. Essentially, they work half an hour less each day but get paid for that time. That's what happens when you treat your employees like crap. Similar thing happened where I work. When I started in the IT department, we had an awesome boss who created a great team environment. As long as we got our work orders and projects completed on time, he didn't care if we came in a few minutes late, took a long lunch, ran an errand, or left a little early some days. What actually happened was everyone was working 50 to 60-hour weeks and loved our jobs. Not only were we completing our projects on time, we were creating new ones that we wanted to do just for the fun and challenge of it. Then our boss left, and a new guy started to enforce and set new rules and restrictions on everything. More than half of our team has already left for new jobs in the last year. The morale is dismal, and we do the bare minimum to get through the day. One guy has his phone alarm set for 5 o'clock, and by 5:01, the place is dead. And now I'm looking for a new job as soon as I can find one. It really amazes me how many bosses have this kind of hyper-strict mentality because time and time again, for decades, it's been shown to be just wildly ineffective. It's just such an indicator of terrible management. And while there might be a few outlier companies that have made that crap work, in general, it just ends up costing a company money and quality of work. It is just baffling to see how many bosses still cling to that sad, desperate need for complete control. People who have nearly been murdered but talked your way out of it. What did you say to your would-be killer that saved your life? Story 1. Not me, but my dad. He was about 25 at the time, probably 35 years ago now. He lived in a bad neighborhood, and after getting a pack of cigs from a 7-Eleven, he was sitting in his car for a second, and a young guy came up to his window with a gun. My dad said, "Give me all your money or I'll kill you right here, right now." He said, "Look, I have $30, and frankly, that effing money is mine. You're gonna have to kill me for it. Is it worth the blood of a human and most likely life in prison for $30 effing dollars?" He said the guy had this type of, well, whatever attitude about it, gave him a goodbye tap on his car like he just came up to say hello and walked away. He said the guy was really casual about it, oddly so. He didn't sleep well for a few months after that experience. Yeah, no kidding, I wouldn't either. I mean, I'll say this, folks, if someone asks you for your money and stuff, give it to them. Just don't mess around, because a lot of times if a person's in a situation where they're going to hold someone up with a gun for money, they're desperate, and maybe desperate enough for $30 to, try and hurt you or scare you. I don't know, but I'm glad that it worked out well for this person's dad, and maybe it would for you, but it's not a risk worth taking. But also, that's just terrifying, and no thank you. Story 2. One time my mother was driving down to Tanzania with my uncle while she was pregnant with me. It was early in the afternoon, so she was extremely shocked to find a bunch of armed robbers waiting on the side of the road like a bunch of hyenas waiting for their prey to come to them. They started waving their guns around, telling my uncle and mother to come out of the car. I believe that they had the intention to kill. However, this is where it gets interesting. The leader of the gang took one look at my mother's belly, saw that it had a bump, and simply let them go away. My mother tells me that when the leader saw that she was pregnant, his eyes filled with remorse. Maybe he had been a former father as well. Anyway, they took my uncle's wallet and gave us goodbye. To this day, I keep on telling my uncle that I saved his life. Story 3. My best friend growing up had an uncle with a bad temper, that along with severe little man syndrome. Anyways, I was leaving her house one night after we'd hung out and studied together for school. While I was walking around the cul-de-sac she lived on, I was grabbed from behind, and whoever it was trying to put me in a headlock. I could tell they were much shorter than me. I was nearing 5'10" by the time I was 14, and this person couldn't have been more than 5'5" at the maximum. Naturally, I put my chin down to stop them and flipped the effer over my shoulder using everything that I had. I looked, and lo and behold, it's the effing uncle. I asked him, "What the F, man?" And he said, "Don't fight me and it won't hurt so bad." I was terrified, but I knew this guy, so I said, "Come on, what's this about? Why are you doing this?" He did nothing but growl, and the look in his eyes said that he wasn't backing down. He recovered pretty quickly from my flip, but I swung my book-filled backpack when he charged me at his face, and he just hit the ground after that. I run back to my friend's house and told her dad everything. He went back out and beat the crap out of his brother. I wasn't allowed to go to her house ever again after that. Yeah, the fact that it was your friend's uncle kind of makes it more terrifying. Like, if it was a stranger, you're like, oh, this person wants to rob me or something. But someone that you know, their uncle tried to kill you. And even if you're not allowed to go back to that house ever, it's like, still, why did he try to kill you? Would he come after you? Did they call the cops on him and let them know? What the hell? Story 4. I'm not entirely sure how close I was to being murdered. This took place back when I worked at the register at McDonald's. It was around 10, we weren't 24 hours and would be closing up soon, and in walks a guy that's drunk off his butt. He comes up to the counter and starts chatting with me about nothing in particular, mostly nonsense I can't remember, but I started to get the impression he wasn't just drunk. I'm doing my best to just humor him, waiting for him to leave, when out of nowhere he says, "If I was going to kill everyone in here, I'd kill you first because you look like you'd know what to do." A bit of a morbid joke, I thought, and said, thanks? At this point, he pulled out a gun from his waistband and pointed it at me. It wasn't like a full-on point, more like he was limply holding the gun in my general direction. I didn't know what to do and only hoped to God he was still joking. He then said, "Bang," and tucked the gun back into his wristband. I think that he just wanted to let me know that he could kill me if he wanted to. He left shortly after that. I informed my manager and was later told that the man was both a regular and longtime friend of my manager who tried to downplay what had happened. I left that job shortly after for school. Story 5. I was accosted by a young kid with a gun. He couldn't have been more than 13. I can't remember the exact conversation, but basically the kid looked at me and said, "Give me anything you have and I'll let you go." I wanted to freak out, but something in me said to remain calm. I said something like, "Is that a real gun or an airsoft?" And he pulled out the clip. Sure enough, it was real, surprisingly. I said, "Look, kid, I don't have anything but $5 and this crappy phone that isn't going to really get you anything. Is this really worth life in prison if you shoot me?" He looked at me, looked at the gun, looked at me, started crying, and turned around and walked away. I did call the police and alert them that there was a kid walking around 14th Street brandishing a firearm, but by the time they got to where I was, the kid was long gone. I pointed the cops in the direction he went and what he looked like and all that stuff, but I'm not sure whatever came of it. Honestly, this story just makes me really sad for that kid. Don't get me wrong, I feel bad for you too. You should never have had to deal with that situation, and it would have been very traumatic. But clearly, this 13-year-old is going through some crap, and I just feel awful for him, you know? The fact that you bringing that up just had him breaking down into tears and leaving. I hope the kid's okay and turned his life around and has not hurt anyone, because once you do that, there's kind of no going... Well, there's going back, but, you know. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.